of the 2020 Waste Tire Market Report. Before we get started, I just want to mention for those of you in the attendance that the bathrooms are located outside in the south end of the hallway of the second floor here. Also, if a fire alarm should sound, please exit using the stairwell and head to the relocation area across the street in Cesar Chavez Park. Thank you. Today, we will present the 2023 data, take questions, and finally, we will discuss the next steps. The workshop is also available at video.calepa.ca.gov to watch live webcast. Also, Spanish interpretation services are available by clicking on the icon at the bottom of the webinar screen. The workshop is also available as a webinar. The webinar will allow stakeholders the opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation using the Q&A widget feature of Zoom. To register for the webinar, go to calrecycle.ca.gov/tires/events. Either way you participate in today's workshop, CalRecycle or Joaquin Wright will take your written comments until December 9th. Okay. A copy of today's presentation can be found at calrecycle.ca.gov/tires/events. Under contract with CalRecycle, GHD Incorporated gathers and analyzes data from California waste tire management companies, CalRecycle databases, and other sources to produce the annual waste tire market report. Without any further delay, let me introduce our presenter. Joaquin Wright is a technical director, sustainable resources engineer, and a tire drive aggregate or TDA specialist for GHD Incorporated. Joaquin has a BS in environmental resources engineering from Cal State Humboldt. For over 20 years, Joaquin has developed, managed material evaluation, research projects, pilot studies, grant projects, and outreach efforts for CalRecycle recycling programs. With that, please welcome Joaquin.
Hello, thank you. My name is Joaquin Wright. Thank you for attending this session. This presentation of the draft findings of the California Waste Tire Market Report for 2023 was prepared by GHD Inc. in partnership with subcontractors DKE Enterprises Inc., Boysen Consulting, and WEC LLC. We thank the many industry stakeholders who contributed their information, data, and insights, as well as the CalRecycle staff who coordinated access to department databases and clarified program policies and trends. All right, next slide, please. So this is just an outline of what we're going to talk about today. The bottom line, what's happening or happened in 2023, and then the market trends by category, and then the recycling outlook. Next slide, please. So the bottom line for 2023 is that recycling continues amid changing conditions. And the picture on the right really talks about the changing conditions of 23 is that we had a lot of increase in export of material, along with other market segment changes. Next slide. The 2023 summary. So we had a decreased total amount of managed tires from the previous year. 2022 was 601,000 tons. It went down to 570,000 tons in 2023. The recycling rate is relatively unchanged at 35.1%, although the tonnage decreased. Economic changes from high interest rates due to inflation concern and a perceived 2023 recession risk contributed to the business markets. There was a continued low unemployment, real wage increases, which resulted in staffing challenges. This is the same as 2022, but it moved into 2023. And the big items for 2023 was that TDF export increased, and there was a decreased landfill disposal quantity. Next slide, please. So here's a pie chart of the 2023 total managed and the market segments. So the market segments, the total managed was 569,684 tons, approximately 57 million PTE, which is passenger tire equivalents. So if we look at this pie chart from the bottom left, where we have an arrow, it says retreads 9.8%, and we go clockwise, we're going to see that retreads are 9.8% of the total. Used tires were 7.8% of the total. Civil engineering, it's just tire-derived aggregate, was 1.5% of the total. Crumb ground rubber was 13.7%, and other recycling was 2.3%. And if we add those pieces of that pie up, which are outlined in green, that's what we call the recycling component of the total, managed at 35.1% of the total, 199,889 tons. And if we keep going clockwise, then you'll see in the pie that now we're in a brown outline, and we start with tire-derived fuel in state at 3.7%, and then tire-derived fuel export at 19.6%, and then alternative daily cover at 3.4% of the total managed. Those combined together make our disposal-related category, which is 26.7% of the total at 151,886 tons. And if we continue going clockwise, the bottom part of the pie chart is disposal, and that was 38.2% of the total, 217,909 tons. Next slide, please. Now, this slide takes those same segments and categories, and each bar chart is 1 year, and this is a 15-year trend by market segment. So there's a lot of information here. But what we can really see about the trends is at the bottom, the blue is the disposal. And if we just look at the recent past, say in 2019 to today, what we see in the disposal is that it was increasing pretty rapidly until 2022. And then this year in 2023, the year we're looking at, the landfill disposal decreased. And so that's a trend that we can really see clearly here. And then when we go to the next category up, the brown, and actually the next bar that you see is the same thing, where that was exported tire-derived fuel, where it was opposite. It was decreasing from 2019 to 2022, and then increased in 2023. So those are our big changes that we can see in the trends, that we had an increase in landfill that then went to a decrease in 23. We had a decrease in exporting that then went to an increase in 23. And then if we look at the top bar components that are all outlined in green, that's the recycling category. And those are relatively stable, and the changes in each market segment is also relatively stable. So those are the trends we can see by looking at the bar charts over the years. So we have landfill trend is decreasing, export trend is increasing, and recycling trend is stable. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the individual market trends that are encompassed in the pie chart and the trend chart. Next slide, please. So this is landfill disposal, or our disposal category. Well, if we look at first, we just take a look at the graph, and we can see that, again, reflecting what we saw before 2019 to 2022, we saw a very strong increase in disposal amounts. And then from 2022 to 2023, at the very right side of the chart, we can see that we had a decrease this 2023. So in 2023, there was 217,909 tons disposed. That's 38.2% of the total. It decreased 26.9% from 2022. And this is tied, our landfill disposal is tied to exports, which increased to India and Japan in 2023. And our 24 trend is that we're going to see a continued decrease in the landfill disposal It's really related to an increase in the exports. Next slide, please. So this is alternative daily cover. Again, if we look at the trend, we can see that it has been increasing over the 15-year timeline, and specifically from 2020 to 2022, it was increasing and then decreased from 22 to 23. There are 2 landfills that use ADC in California. So there was 19,307 tons, 3.4% of the total for 2023, which was a decrease of 8.8% from 2022. There isn't a direct tie, but there is some type of tie between if the landfills that are using the ADC are using a lot of waste, filling a lot of their space, then they're going to have an increase in the ADC in general, and also the other way. When it declines, the landfills in general, then we're going to see a decline in ADC use. The 24 trend is a steady relationship to landfill operations, so we're likely to see a decrease in the next year or 2 as well. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. All right, there's a lot going on here. So if we look at our chart, what we see is, first, I'll just mention that the color is a brown color, which is basically part of our disposal related category. So this is part of our disposal related category. And if we look at our chart from the bottom up in terms of lines, we see that the bottom blue-gray line is baled waste tire treads. And then the tan line above that is size reduced TDF. And then the total is the darker brown line on the top. In 2023, there was 111,721 tons exported, 19.6% of the total. It was a drastic or dramatic increase of 176% from 2022. And if we look at the chart on the right in the last 4 or 5 years, starting at 2019, we can see we had a decreased rate for 3 years and all the way into 2022. And then in 2023, we had a reversal of the trend and an increase. Export is used in cement kilns, power plants, pulp and paper and chemical plants in select countries. And in 2023, there was much better economics for producers to export. And the trend is export demand is growing, and we're likely to see continued growth in 24 and also 25 if things keep going as they are right now. So it's important to note that traditional exports have been tied to TDF usage, but recent industry reporting has shown that exported material to India is claimed to be used for manufacturing of crumb rubber. So we say TDF, but I want to give a note that says recently we're getting information that it isn't exported just for TDF, but also for the making of crumb rubber. Then there's some other things to talk about in terms of the international market. There's what's called a Basel Convention that allows countries to limit or exclude imports of hazardous materials. Waste tires, whole and shredded, are not considered hazardous by US EPA standards. But the Basel Convention allows countries to categorize for themselves what materials are considered hazardous waste. The US is not part of the Basel Convention, but changes in the other countries' export regulations can affect the California export market. And as of May 2024, the European Union waste shipment regulations are changing and resulting in EU countries shipping material easier within the EU bloc, but harder to ship to other countries. The intent is to prohibit other countries from receiving materials and processing them in facilities that use methods not allowed in the EU. And these changes can also have indirect effects on the California waste tire material export market. So when other countries and regions don't export tire-derived material, the demand for US-based material can increase, which is what we believe we're currently seeing in the market today. Next slide, please. So this is showing in-state tire-derived fuel. And if we look at the graphical representation, We have the blue line that's fiber from tires, from recycled tires. And then we have the tan line, which is whole size reduced TDF. And then the combination of both those amounts is the dark line on top. And this is also disposal related. There was 20,858 tons in 2023, 3.7% of the total, a decrease of 35.7% from 2022. So when we look at the graphical representation, we see again right around 2018 and 19, the in-state use of TDF started to decline and has continued to decline all the way to 2023. So there's a continued impact from 2022 changed cement kiln fuel specifications. So from the last year, one of the cement kilns changed their specifications and that dropped it even further. So the 2024 trend is, we're hoping to see a stabilization. We might see that at this point or a continued decrease. In 2023, only 2 cement kilns were receiving TDF, and one had a month-long plant maintenance shutdown, so that contributed to this continuing decrease. There's something to note here. We should note that there's greenhouse gas quantification in the future, which may result in an increased value for using TDF, potentially changing this downward trend. And really what that is referring to is that there's analysis going on about greenhouse gas impacts from the different types of fuels that are used in cement production. And if tires show a greenhouse gas benefit, we're likely to see a change in that trend. Next slide, please. All right. This is civil engineering, tire-derived aggregate. And if we look at the graphical representation, we have 2 categories. We have the non-landfill projects, things like road repair, vibration attenuation. We have the landfill projects, which is mostly associated with landfill gas collection systems and other civil engineering projects within a landfill. And then the total is the green line on top. And this is considered a recycling segment of our categories. And you can see that if we look at the graphical representation, that it's kind of on, off, depending upon the year. There was 8,682 tons used in 2023, 1.5% of the total. It was an increase of 17.8% from 2022. There's approximately 3,200 tons on landfill projects in 2023. And then there was an LA Metro vibration attenuation project, which did use the CalRecycle grant as well. And they used 5,482 tons in 2023. Environmental concerns associated with 6-PPDQ have stunted the use of this material in non-landfill projects, but there is still a grant solicitation at CalRecycle for $750,000 a year allocated. Landfill projects are going to continue to be used at a couple of the large sites, so we anticipate to see that continuing through in the future. Thank you. Next slide. So here, when we take a look at the graphical representation over the last 15 years or so, we could see again the trend here is crumb ground rubber in the last 3 or 4 years. In 2020 started to increase and increased pretty had a high rate of increase until 2022 and then has leveled off in 2023. In general, when we look at crumb ground rubber trend over the years, it's always stayed high and has a lot of potential. It looks like we'll probably keep seeing this type of trend in the high over 60,000 ton range. So in 2023, it was 78,159 tons, 13.7% of the total. It's approximately the same tonnage as 2022. This includes paving, molded, other turf infill, ground rubber. And the 2024 trend is stable, and we are hearing about market changes on the horizon, but the outlook is stable. So just a note, in California, turf infill has been on the decline since 2015. We're talking about turf here, as potential users wait for the results from the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment study on potential health concerns. Turf infill has geographic market differences between the northern and southern parts of the state. 25% of turf infill use is in Northern California and 75% in Southern California. And so in California, we've seen a large decline in its use, but in the nation, turf infill amounts have increased in 2023 and into 2024. Next slide, please. Used tires. If we look at the graph, first off, this is a recycling component. So this is part of our recycled material. And it's been pretty steady, relatively on an average over the last 15 years. For 2023, it was 44,203 tons, 7.8% of the total, a decrease of 10% from 2022. Used tires are sold in California tire shops, and they're also exported mainly to Mexico. So the Mexico export quota is set by the Mexican federal and state officials yearly. The average used tire import quota from California into Baja California is 760,000 tires per year. According to Mexico's National Rubber Industry Chamber, the imports from the U.S. are rising and were last reported at 1.2 million. The used tire category is hard to accurately trace and is likely underreported by the industry. We've known this for a while, and these numbers are probably high. It is a big market for certain tire processors. Next slide, please. Retreads. Again, here is a green line, which shows this as part of our recycling category. And if we look at the trends in the last 3 or 4 years, 2020, we were starting to see retread tire tonnage increase. And then it went down slightly from 2022 to 2023. But in general, retreads are always a very high value at 40,000 or more. And it seems to be the trend is that it is growing. 55,645 tons in 2023, 9.8% of the total. This decreased 3% from 2022. Retreads compete with inexpensive import tires. And the 2024 trend is a slight increase reported by retreaders based on trade and consumer value. So we expect to see that stable, if not increasing, in 2024 and 2025. Next slide, please. All right, so this is the Caltrans rubberized pavement graphical representation. So this information comes from Caltrans. On the left side, we have the total asphalt placed and percent rubberized hot mix asphalt. So if we're looking at the left chart, the bar chart is the total hot mix asphalt in metric tons that Caltrans placed. And then the green line is the rubberized hot mix asphalt as a percentage of the total. And we can see from 2018 to 2023, Caltrans had a decrease in the total hot mix asphalt that they've placed. And that would also make sense that we're going to see a correlating decrease in the rubberized hot mix asphalt that's placed. On the right-hand side, we see Caltrans chrome rubber used in millions of pounds, and it shows the same type of trend since 2018, basically as the total hot mix asphalt in metric tons on the left, as those values are declining, so is the amount of poundage of chrome rubber used. Now, Caltrans has a statutory minimum requirement of 11.58 pounds of chrome rubber per metric ton of total asphalt paving materials used. So they have a minimum. In 2022, Caltrans used 12.63 pounds per metric ton. And in 2023, Caltrans draft values, the report for 2023 has not been published yet, but the draft values show a continued decrease to approximately 11.7 pounds per metric ton of asphalt placed. So this is a mandate, and we expect in 2024 and 25 that the chrome rubber values at or slightly above the statutory minimum of 11.58 pounds of crumb rubber per metric ton of total asphalt paving material used. Next slide, please. So here's our 2023 CalRecycle support programs. Rubberized Pavement Grant Program, TRP. In 2023, awarded 29 grantees with an estimated usage of 12.2 million pounds. The historical average has been 8.8 million pounds per year. Then there's the Tire Incentive Program, TIP, awarded in 2023, 8 grantees, estimated 18.3 million pounds. The participants have reported to date that 16 million pounds was used in 2023. The historic average is 12.9 million pounds per year. And the Tire-Derived Aggregate Grant Program for 2023, 1 grantee was awarded an estimate usage of 1 million pounds. The historical average has been 10 million pounds per year. And the Tire-Derived Product Grant Program, there were no eligible applicants in 2023, 0 was awarded. The historic average is 3.0 million, 3 million pounds per year. So the historic average for the TRP and the TDA are based on the previous 8 fiscal years, and the historic average for the TIP and TDP based on the previous 6 fiscal years. The TDP grant program is offered every other fiscal year. Next slide, thank you. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the outlook. That was, we looked at the total picture in the pie, we looked at the trend over the years, then we looked at each individual market segment, and now we're going to take a look at some broader perspectives. Next slide. So this is how tire management in the California context, how the waste tire management. So how waste was managed on the left. What we're really able to see here is on the left, we have 2022 numbers for all materials in the state of California, 76 million tons. And those rates, the recycling rate for all materials was 40.8%. The disposal related was 5.9%, and the disposal was 53.3%. And then on the next bar over, we see tires for 2022. And 0.6 million tons in 2022. And we had a recycling rate of 34.7%, disposal related rate of 15.7, and disposal rate of 49.6. And then the one on the right is tires for 2023. We had 0.57 million tons. And the recycling rate was 35.1%, disposal 26.7, and I'm sorry, disposal related, and disposal 38.2. So when we look at 2022 and 2023 tire bar charts, this is telling us the picture, the overall picture again, and we're seeing a slight increase in the percentage of material recycled from 34.7 to 35.1, and we're seeing an increase in the disposal related from 15.7 to 26.7, and a decrease in disposal. And again, the drivers that we see for the changes in the disposal and the relationship between disposal and disposal related is export values have increased dramatically. Then if we look to the right, we can see the recycling rate trend. The blue line on the top is all materials in the state, and the green line is tires. And the thing that I like to highlight here is when we look at the tire line, we're really seeing a very consistent recycling rate. Even though our tonnages have been changing, the rate has been consistently around 35% since, say, 2018. And that's a great thing to have a stable recycling rate when looking for the positive aspects here. So recycling tire rate, slight increase over 2022, disposal related 10% increase, and disposal 10% decrease. So again, we're seeing the relationship between export and disposal here. Next graph, please. Next slide. Recycling outlook. So this is taking the market segments and putting them into categories. And what we're really looking at here in the graphical representation is disposal in the blue on the bottom. Disposal related is the tan brown color, and then recycled is the green on top. And then we have the percent recycled rate overlaid on top of that, and then the landfill diversion percentage rate as well. In 2023, recycled tons decreased 4% to 199,889, and recycling rate increased 0.4% to 35.1. So the 23 trends were recent investments in ownership changes. So the businesses are shuffling around their, I would say their models and what's important to them and where they're putting material. And export demand increased, and the recycling rate is stable. So when we look at the landfill diversion rate, that tells the story too. We see that from 2019, the landfills were increasing at this, and that means the landfill diversion rate was going down. So the blue is on the bottom is seeing our increase in landfill tonnage, and then the blue line is showing the diversion, as it should, going the other way. And then from 2022 to 2023, we see an increase in our landfill diversion. And that's reflected in that rate line, in the light blue rate line. And then again, the recycled line is staying steady at 35%. And here we can see the same relationships we saw in the beginning, but just in the broader category. Disposal went up from 2020 to 2022, and then went down from 2022 to 23. And the disposal related were decreasing until 2022, 2023, where it increased. And the recycling bars in the last 4 or 5 years are relatively the same. So that's kind of the outlook, is that we're likely to see the same trend of decreased landfill and increased export and stable recycling. Next slide, please. Thank you very much, and we welcome feedback. By December 9th, the report is expected to be finalized January 31st, 2025. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Mustafa Batan or myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin, for that great presentation. We will open up the floor for a Q&A. And if you are on the attendance, you could raise your hand and ask. We'll give you a microphone to ask any questions you have. And for those folks that are online, please use the Q&A widget on the Zoom meeting, and we will read your questions, and we'll answer it as much as we can.
Going in the room here. There you go, sir.
Thanks, Joaquin and Mustafa. Great presentation, interesting information. Joaquin, you had focused a bit on the crumb rubber and ground rubber market segment. And you touched on the fact that the amount of tire crumb going into turf is going down. And it looked like Caltrans overall asphalt paving and the commensurate level of rack is going down a bit. So can you speak a little bit about what's holding that overall crumb steady, kind of where you're seeing growth?
Yeah, well, we're seeing stability at this point, and potential growth. And that is in the other products in the product market, where we have the crumb and the rubber being used to make other products. And so that's where we're having a stable market, where they're continuing to make these products and use up the crumb. And some of it's going into private rubberized as well, not just Caltrans. So there is a market we're not seeing in this presentation, which is going to be private use in rubberized. And that's where we have kind of the solid usage. There is also a lot of energy from other folks trying to come into California and utilize the amount of material that is going to the disposal. So there are a lot of folks in this marketplace that are trying to find a way to use that material. So we're really optimistic about that in the future. And we hear a lot of folks trying to break in, and they're all looking for avenues to make it more palatable for them to come into the state. But there are some companies that are hoping to try to use all of that material. Now that's an optimistic perspective, obviously, but that's the market that we see as being stable and has the most potential for growth in the near future. Is products.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's really interesting. Within the product manufacturing, is there any new activities there that's kind of driving demand? Is this were you able to gain any insights?
Yeah, I mean, there are the companies that are making products that have been in the marketplace for a while are steadily trying to increase their share and increase their visibility. And so that's something we hear a lot from everybody is they would like, all the product manufacturers are looking for more avenues to give them I wouldn't say leg up, but give them, an easier way to sell more products in California with California material. And there are other products, without talking about specific products, there are products in the transportation industry where they're really looking at trying to get Caltrans involved and, get on the list where their products can then be used a lot in the state. And so there's a variety of those folks. And that's really where I see a lot of the potential in the future.
Thanks.
You have a question online here.
Yes, sir.
We have our first question on the QA widget. The question is, why is Japan one of the top importers of tires for landfill?
Would you say that again?
Why is Japan one of the top importers of tires for landfill?
I'm not aware that Japan is taking tires for landfill. Japan uses tires in their industry for fuel. They've been a big fuel user for many years. So I'm not aware that they're taking, I'm not sure the question, but I'm not aware that they're taking it to be landfilled in Japan. They're just, and all export is based on, the economics. So when we have port issues that can shut it off, we almost had it shut off in 2024 with the potential strike that started in the East Coast. But Japan has traditionally been a user for fuel.
Maybe answer the question that way.
Yes.
Tire drive fuel.
For tire drive fuel.
And that question, tire drive fuel.
Oh, yes. Why? Well, their rules, they aren't, they allow their industry to use TDF as fuel. And so in various industrial aspects where they need energy, if they can use TDF, they will. So Japan is a TDF user and has been for many years. Sorry if I misunderstood that.
We've seen some tires being used for land reclamation projects. Which of the categories of waste tire management would this fall under? And he said, for example, as inert filling material for old mines.
I am not aware that we have seen that in California, but that particular application would be like a TDA application. So that would be using the material for fill. It has a lot of benefits for fill, depending upon the engineering requirements of the project. It's lightweight, it doesn't hold water, it's great benefits. And those would be the reasons why you would use it in a reclamation project. I would definitely be very interested in learning about reclamation projects that have used TDA just for the knowledge base. But my understanding is that we don't have any of those in the state of California, at least not that I'm aware of.
Thank you, Joaquin. We'll maybe hang on a few more minutes and see if people have any other questions. Just keep in mind, we still have the opportunity until December 9th, to submit any comments and questions you may have in writing. But Clark has a question.
Thanks, Mustafa. Good discussion. Joaquin, you had mentioned with regards to in-state TDF utilization by our cement kilns, that there's some greenhouse gas analysis taking place that may change kind of the direction of that market. Could you speak a little bit more to kind of the analysis taking place? Is that something that the kilns are doing in response to the California's cap and trade program, or is this happening at the federal level? Anyway, I was hoping you could shed a little more light on that.
I mean, this topic is federal, is a national topic as well, the greenhouse gas understanding. But in California, they're looking for, the cement kilns themselves are looking into it, and they are going to want to share what fuels they can use to decrease their greenhouse gas output. And I believe that was part of regulation that the governor put in place a year or so ago. So it's a new thing where they're looking at analyzing their different fuel sources and then sharing the greenhouse gas component of it. Is that something that's coming in a federal sense as well, associated with the Inflation Reduction Act monies, and it leads into discussions of life cycle analysis and environmental product declarations, so that this idea can be captured, what materials you use and what the greenhouse gas effects are of those different materials. And then decisions can be made for funding and other sources about a priority for materials that reduce the industry, whatever it may be, it reduces their greenhouse gas footprint. So we expect to see that start to filter through the tire market and the tire analysis. We're seeing it already in products and comparing greenhouse gas of a recycled tire material product versus a more traditional, say, cement or something else, and making a comparison and seeing the value of using recycled material from a greenhouse gas perspective. And the cement kilns are beginning to look at their energy and relate it to greenhouse gas as well. And that's a trend we're seeing, in a national and international sense. I hope that helped.
That helps. Thank you.
We've not seen any additional questions.
There's one more. We have a question from Charlotte Wood. Why are we exporting when there's profit for our economy at a high rate for rubber powder?
Well, the short answer is we still have excess material. So the market that can absorb the crumb rubber is taking it due to whatever the constraints are. And then there's still a lot of material left over. So as we see, our disposal numbers are basically reflective of material that has had the opportunity to be used in the various markets or market segments, and then there's still material left. And then that material, instead of going to the landfill when there's opportunity, the producers, of course, would export it if there was an opportunity. And so right now there happens to be opportunity in the export market because of demand from we've heard it's mostly India has increased their demand. And so that's why the material is not staying in the state and being used, is that the amounts that can be used in those markets are being absorbed, and then there's still material left, and it goes to the landfill. And then what we're seeing is that some of that is being diverted to export. So it's not going to landfill, it's going to export, but we still have a large amount of material being landfilled every year. I hope that answered that question.
This is great. I feel like I have like a personal dialogue taking place, right? Joaquin, you
trying to stump me. No.
you talked a bit about export of used tires to Mexico, and you mentioned an industry association down there that I wasn't familiar with that provided some data. It sounded like with regards to kind of waste tires received. Could you talk a little bit more about that group?
The Mexico's National Rubber Industry Chamber. It's very difficult for us to get data points from Mexico. They don't have a robust regulatory structure. And so it's very hard for us to get these numbers. So that's really just their own self-reporting. And they also change how much they let in every year. And there's no official track for us to follow. Like we can go to Caltrans to understand Caltrans usage because they trace it. But in Mexico, it's still very difficult to capture actual information. So what we've seen is that every couple years, maybe every 4 years, there seems to be, and I don't say 4 is like I know for sure. Every so many years, there seems to be effort from the Mexican government to quantify and understand what's going on, and then they'll produce something, one of their groups, and you'll be able to see what they're reporting. But we don't really know how they're even developing those numbers. So we just look and try to get the best information we can, but it isn't easy, and there isn't a specific source that you can go back to. So you just wait. Like a lot of the values we have that we can find are really coming from, almost pandemic years, and there's really nothing being reported in the recent future, in the recent history. So that's a big area where we're not getting a lot of current information exactly. We don't even know exactly yearly how much they're capping or limiting or not limiting tires going into Baja from California, which would be the closest, the most interesting data set we'd like to see. Of course, there's great discussion about the border and tires going in, and there's a lot of discussion, but there's very few places where we can get data points.
Thanks, Joaquin. And with that industry group, is your sense that that is mainly tire dealers, or is it a broader group as far as membership, or we just don't know?
There's a lot of ground, what we call roots, or I don't know, community usage or focus on trying to understand how they can reuse the waste tires in their communities. And in Mexico, it really is going to cement kiln usage. There's a couple cement kilns that are taking material, but getting the infrastructure there, like we don't know that there's very many shredders even. Like we've heard of one that is associated with cement kilns. So again, it's a lack of information and not a lot of structure yet in Mexico in terms of how to contend with their waste tires. Even quantifying where they are seems to be a little bit nebulous.
Thank you.
I hope.
We have a question from Charlotte Wood who says, so you're saying there's excess TDA?
Yes, that's a correct. I would say that's correct. In order to landfill tires in California, they need to be shredded. They need to be cut at least in half. And usually the way that works is the processors have setups. They don't want to change them very much. So they have a setup that usually takes the tires in and shreds them once. Usually there are 2-pass systems and that recirculate it and shred it twice. And 2-pass material can be, if it's thoughtfully done, can be TDA. So yes, they have to shred the material to landfill it, and we could call that material a form of TDA that could be used, as we traditionally use TDA. I hope that answered that question. I mean, just to add to that, TDA is kind of like a precursor. You take the waste tires. We don't have lots of applications where we're using whole tires. So we take the material, we shred it a couple times, and then that can become material that goes to different feedstocks. It can be changed to go to crumb. It can go to TDA. TDA is also can be sized and be a TDF. For certain energy users. TDA is the first processing, the least expensive processing that you can do to the tire to then start to put it into different pathways for reuse.
Joaquin, I have a question here. It seems Caltrans' use of chrome rubber has been either stagnant or has been slightly going down. Do we have any insight why that is? Because either that number is stable, or you mentioned that even this year, the draft report showed that they're less than 12%. So they're still meeting the mandate, but it seems like there's not much of a growth in that market, at least at Caltrans. Do we have any insight?
Well, the mandate is based on hot asphalt placed, and this will just be discussion points, meaning that if hot asphalt was placed more, then we would have more crumb rubber usage because it's mandated in Caltrans to use a certain percent. And I don't think that those are tied, meaning Caltrans would use more hot mix asphalt if it was appropriate for their program. It has nothing to do with rubber. And what we kind of see is that the roads that Caltrans are responsible for tend to be high volume roads, highways, major thoroughfares. And those thoroughfares are going to a form of concrete, and they're laying concrete down. They're not laying hot mix asphalt for those type of corridor roads. So that can contribute to this discussion, is that, maybe more cities and counties and communities are going to be using hot mix asphalt versus Caltrans. They're doing a lot of placement of really high traffic roads that need a heavier duty road system, engineered road system. That's just talk. I don't have any specific values to back that up.
Another question.
So Joaquin, when you're surveying industry, I'm curious if you got any insights from them about tire processing and whether they have preferences for certain type of tires for certain applications. And kind of what's triggered my thought along these lines is, I know you had mentioned with regards to retreads, right, where we have our more heavy duty vehicles that are more suited to retreads. They're competing with cheap imports, right, that aren't as conducive to retreading. But I'm curious if there's other things you're hearing from industry, like, hey, we'd rather have passenger tires for making TDA than, heavy duty truck tires, or, if there's anything that's like disruptive besides from the retread you're seeing as far as, which tires are suitable for which various end markets.
Well, in general, retreads are going to be transportation tires, truck tires. They're not going to be passenger tires. And there's a lot of discussion about maybe finding ways to do passenger tires with retreads, but there are such a diverse amount of different sizes and types and all the different types of tires, and that it's difficult for retreaders to set themselves up for all of those myriad of different casings they need. And so that isn't really their market. Their market is transportation, where those trucks are on the road all day, every day. It makes fiscal sense. It's a circular economy. So that's the state of where that is for retreaders. And then when you're taking the material off, there is a difference in material from truck tires in terms of rubber content, natural rubber content. There's a difference in the material from a truck tire versus a passenger tire. And so there is a preferential use of the rubber from those sources. And that just depends upon the individual product maker and what's important to them in terms of the material source. But I can't say that I've heard anything specific from these from industry about wanting to see a particular change in that. I don't know if that helped. Did I miss something?
No, that's helpful. So so then it sounds like there are situations where someone who's making a product using crumb might be requesting that crumb produced from specific types of tires versus other
and it will truck rubber versus passenger tire. And then I believe there's some type of preferential perspective on buffings versus crumb derived from other ways. Buffings are going to be from the retread industry coming off of truck tires, so they're going to be more predictable in that rubber.
And it's going to be a little different than crumb derived from other processes, like taking TDA and then running it through a lot of pulverization mills to come down to a certain size of crumb. That's going to be a different type of product versus the buffings, if that makes sense. So there are different differences there, and it's dependent upon who's using it and why they're using it, which they're going to prefer. I think buffings are in high demand, but I don't know more than that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joaquin. Thank you, Joaquin, for that great presentation. Since we don't have any other questions online or in person, we will go ahead and wrap up the workshop. Thank you for joining the workshop today. As we mentioned, we will continue to take comments until Monday, December 9th. The comments can be sent to Joaquin Wright or to myself, Mustafa Botan, at calrecycle.ca.gov. And after the comments period ends, the report will be finalized and posted on CalRecycle's publication page. And we anticipate the report to be published after January 31st. And thank you all for attending this workshop. And we'll see you at our next workshop next year for the market report. And we're going to have our 5-year tire plan workshop on December 4th. And that will also be a hybrid as well. Thank you all. That concludes the workshop.